Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, I got a bunch of rejects with me tonight, and we're going to start it off with Lisa, the Occult Reject mad scientist. What is going on, Lisa? How are you?
I am good. I'm really looking forward to this talk. I heard about Sol a little bit and his mentions of the DNA, and I got really excited. And
Yeah.
so I'm really looking forward to this. And thank you all for having me. Looking forward to the conversation with the rest of the fellow occult rejects. Thank
Awesome. No, thank you very much for making time coming on.
you.
And we got Frater Jin the Ninja. What is going
The
on?
f- hey boss, what's up? I should say hey cardinal. I guess the
Sorry.
frater returns. So hey, I'm Jin the Ninja. I have a show called Threshold Saints, which is about serial experiments and speculative ontology. So we were listening to Soul discuss about like his speculative Gnosticism. Well, that's exactly what my show's about and what I also do on Fridays. And so we have a new episode of The Grey Lodge coming out tomorrow. So join us live if you want to. Yeah, and yeah, that's what you can find my links in the bottom. And thank you to the rejects who are on. And it's always great to work with you guys.
Hell yeah. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you joining this one, man. And to the Headless Giant is next. What is going on, sir? Thank you very much for making it.
Absolutely fresh out of work. So if you have any sort of occult stories or any kind of magical, mystical mailbag items, you can send it to my email at the Headless Giant Podcast at gmail.com, and we will read those out tonight.
I was just going to say, you guys got about 2 hours. If you want to get it in, we might be able to read yours tonight. So if you're listening now, get to that email if you got any stories for us. Thank you again, Headless. That's awesome. And we got JJ Vance, not the vice president, my favorite garbage can dude. What is going on, sir?
Nick, greetings, sir. Always great to join you for an Occult Rejects show here. Appreciate the invite as always. And fellow Occult Rejects, always great to join y'all. And Saul, nice to meet you there, sir. Looking forward to the conversation. JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD, and perhaps more notably, not the vice president, right there.
In case people forget.
And Wednesdays 8 p.m. YouTube and Twixter. Fridays with Occult Rejects. Nick and I co-host a show there on Fridays, a conspiracy culture roundtable, and then for a new Sunday show on Patreon, Operation GCD Sundays. It's my adventures in high weirdness and other true crime stuff that I've encountered and been interested in over the years. So great to join y'all. Definitely check out that stuff. Links in the show notes.
Definitely go check out that Patreon. I know my man puts a lot of time into those solo shows he does. It's fucking ridiculous. So it's definitely worth the money.
Tales of high weirdness.
Yeah. Last but not least, Ethan Indigo, sir. Please let everybody know what is up with your deal and your books.
Honored to be here. I'm a writer and an observer, as well as really wrote the Tao of Thoth, a couple other things. Geometry of Energy, Terrorist Letters. I'm really excited, though, to hear what Saul has to say, and always enjoy interacting, and I'm honored to be here.
Oh, yeah, Ethan. It's always great to have you with us. And finally, to the guest himself, a few minutes in, finally got to him, Sol Luckman. Please let everybody know what your deal is and when they can find all your amazing writings and work.
I appreciate that, Nick, and hello to all of you. Really appreciate you being here and having an interest in having this discussion wherever it's going to go. You can find me over at substack.com, solluckman.substack.com. I also have an author's website, books.solluckman.com. And if you go there, currently I think two of my books, one book, Potentiate Your DNA, is for free as a download, and then you can also get a pretty meaty sample of my two most recent books, which are companion volumes, Out Through the Indoor and Get Out of Here Alive. So please go and download that and see what you think. So thanks for having me once again.
Of course. No, then thank you for reaching out to me. I mean, easy guest. I appreciate it. So I guess, I know I had asked you earlier, but I guess if you don't mind repeating yourself a little bit, I guess what got you into getting into this whole life, looking at things this way?
So if people are out there who have heard my sad story, my sob story, please forgive me, but I'll give you the skinny. I was in graduate school back in the 90s. I got some recommended travel I say travel interventions to fly under the radar, but a lot of you will know what I'm talking about. And then I ended up with some kind of weird, mysterious autoimmune illness not too long after that. Went down a real rabbit hole into energy medicine, qigong, holistic thinking methodologies, that kind of thing, and in a kind of desperate attempt to regain my health. I had always been very healthy, very athletic, and I ended up studying with a qigong teacher who helped me a lot. I began to understand the nature of bioenergy, and then I got into allergy elimination work where I was helping people, clear for candida and sugar allergies and all this kind of thing using a kind of homeopathic technique with acupressure. And it was in that context that I began exploring with a lot of clients that I was doing kinesiology or muscle testing on. I began exploring the interface between sound, specifically language, and more specifically vowels and DNA, and more specifically the nucleotides of DNA, the nucleotide bases. So my thesis is that the 5 vowels in English are a kind of distillation of the vowels, the major and minor vowels around the world. And it's basically, I say that for a variety of reasons. If you read William Henry's work, he goes into some of this in relation to the alchemical language, the language of the birds, that sort of thing, and why he thinks that the English is the language of the bards, the modern day iteration of the language of the birds in some ways, or it has the codes to understand that ancient alchemical language of transformation and transmutation. So it was very, very fascinating to pursue this line of thinking and then to put it into practice when my partner Lee and I went on this crazy mystical shamanic journey and ended up down in South America, where I know Greg Carlwood called what I had, he's the Higher Side Chats host, he called what I had a contactee experience, where we saw these crazy lights coming at us over the water and they kind of popped into our bodies. And the next morning we woke up and we had these vowel codes in our minds that we were supposed to sing and think simultaneously. And when we did that, I started getting well after I had tried so many things for the better part of a decade. And so not long after that, Lee and I started offering this work, which we were calling potentiation at the time. It became the Regenetics method. We began offering that to people at a distance back home. We were down in Brazil when this occurred, and people began having these amazing responses to it, and having healings and sort of sudden miraculous changes in their lives. And so that was 20 years ago. So for the last 20 years, we worked with thousands of people all over the globe, and I've written a couple of books on it. Potentiate Your DNA is one of them. Conscious Healing is another. Potentiate Your DNA is it's been translated into Spanish and French, so it's available if you're a speaker of those languages. Goodness, I don't know where to go with all that. It changed my life in a major way, and it really made me rethink the materialistic empiricist paradigm that we live in.
If you don't mind me asking, just because I don't have a chance to ask people this probably that often. Now, you mentioned you were in Brazil for 20 years. What was
I was down there at the time.
Oh, okay. I thought you said
I had been doing. I mean, I've spent a good bit of time in Brazil. Let's put it that
way.
All
right. That's fine.
I didn't spend 20 years there.
All right. What So like you went to Brazil, I'm assuming, for spiritual stuff, correct?
Well, actually, I initially went as part of my graduate research in literature. I was looking at various parts of Brazilian culture. I was studying Brazilian modern and 19th century Brazilian literature, as well as MPB, which is Brazilian popular music. And I was looking at concrete poetry and a variety of very interesting trends in Brazilian cultural production. And I was synthesizing that through a comparative lens and looking at it in relation to French culture and production and American and British culture and production.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just because when you mentioned you were in Brazil, I mean, that is I would say it's like a hotbed of spirituality. I mean, good or bad. So I was just wondering, like, what maybe some of your experiences. I mean, unless like you weren't really around that too much. I don't know, because now you're saying you're there for school. I just assumed you were there.
That's how I initially got myself down to Brazil. I'd been studying Portuguese, and I went to do dissertation research and to get better at Portuguese. And it was that trip that I got the interventions for that I then, ended up getting sick from. And then going back to Brazil years later after having been ill for quite a while as a kind of return to the source of where it all went wrong in a way. And on the second go around, yeah, I did. I mean, there's a figure down there named Trigueirinho, who's a kind of Steinerian type fellow who runs I mean, ultimately, I think of all of these things as cults at this point. But I wrote a book called "The World Cult and You," so I think of basically everything as a cult in our world. But I've read his books, and I know that I read them in Portuguese. I'm not even sure if they're available in English. Trigueirinho is his name. But there are certainly lots of figures down there. Obviously all of the ayahuasca, the plant spirit medicine that's going on. And yeah, I have mixed feelings about a lot of that, as do many people. Not the actual practice of doing it, but the business of it, and a lot of what goes with it these days. I mean, in itself, I think it's a time-honored way of interfacing with certain level of consciousness that can be difficult to get to on one's own. But in terms of what it's become, it's a bit of a mixed bag.
We do have I guess real quick, I just wanted to ask you something. Did you come across any of like kind of, I know you said it already, I don't want to say cults, but I mean that is in there, spiritual groups that were actually like like kind of big or anything like that, had compounds, put it that way?
Yeah, there were these people who called themselves the Star People, and they were also doing this was way back in the day in the 1990s, and they had it was a big movement, and they were big into doing group ayahuasca ceremonies and that sort of thing. It was pretty intense. I mean, I've also done all the carnival stuff and all the craziness, and I've written about that in a forthcoming novel called Beginner's Luke, where I describe a lot of what I went through in Brazil, including contracting this crazy parasite that supposedly destroys the nerves to your heart and kills you eventually. But this work that I developed with Lee got rid of it.
So I had a question about the energy working. Is it similar to Reiki? Is it like based in symbols? I'm not exactly sure the techniques involved.
Yeah, I'm obviously familiar with Reiki, and I would say, other than the fact that it's using energy in some broad sense, no, I wouldn't say it has a lot to do with Reiki. It's specifically, there's various linguistic codes that are just vowel based, and you sing one set of codes, and so you're using the 5 vowels, and you sing them at a certain note or notes. Potentiation, for example, uses 528 hertz. That's the mi note of the solfeggio scale. And then the other activations in the Regenetics method incorporate more notes from that scale. So you're singing along, and at the same time you're thinking another set of codes. So you might be singing the vowel for the vowel ah, and you might be thinking underneath it the vowel for e. and sometimes they might actually line up so that you're singing and thinking. And there are also some silences involved where you're not thinking or not saying anything, and so that's brings in another element that kind of frames some of this work. You know how musicians often say, it's the silence that creates the music. Well, that also applies here as well. And so you do that, and you do that for about 20 to 30 minutes for a session. That's how it works, and it's very meditative. A lot of people say it puts them into kind of a trance. My experience is that it has a lot to do with creating alternative brain activity, and it's very powerful to just do it. But it's not really designed as a meditation. It's designed as a one-time session that starts a process. When you start the process, then it rolls out for 42 weeks, which is like a gestation cycle. So you're literally going through some kind of energetic rebirth, during which time your bioenergy blueprint, your biofield, your aura is being repatterned and healed of distortions and traumas.
That's super interesting. So, and it is similar to Reiki, that it's non-touch or distance healing.
That's correct. You can do it in person, and so you can do it in a way that the person can hear what you're singing. But we do it totally ceremonially, where people just go into their own kind of meditative environment, or it could be fishing for that matter, but it doesn't really matter. But it's somewhere where they can just be there, present in some way for the session, and then we perform it where we are. We work with people, like I said, all over the world, so different time zones and that kind of thing. So it doesn't really matter if people can hear it or not. It's sound healing, but sound is also, in my experience, observation, and theory, it is a non-local phenomenon as well.
There is to validate the idea of that type of healing. There's another similar practice like Reiki called Jo-Rei. It's from Japan too. I wonder if you might have heard of that too.
I've only heard of it. I mean, I've lived in Japan, so that's come across my plate, but I'm not exactly sure how that works.
That must have been an interesting experience in Japan. I believe it's very similar to your idea of instigating a new pattern, and maybe even, goes into epigenetics. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it's familiar to what you were talking about.
Well, you mentioned epigenetics, and that's certainly an important piece of what's going on with regenetics. Epigenetics is something I cite. I cite wave genetics in the work of Peter Gurayev and Vladimir Poponin. That's very, very fascinating stuff. I cite quantum bioholography, which is a whole area of study with people like Richard Allen Miller, this physicist, and other physicists back in the 70s. They wrote a paper which is available on my Substack. It's called A Holographic Concept of Reality, and it's really, really fascinating. And so Richard Allen Miller and his former wife, Iona Miller, very brilliant thinkers and writers. I mean, they've written great articles on DNA and DNA as a holographic translation mechanism. And where I go with that is I basically explore how DNA functions as a holographic translation mechanism for taking sound waves and turning them into light, or taking light waves and turning them into sound. So you can sing to the DNA, and that energy will basically turn upside down, and it will enter the upside down of your aura, if you want to use a Stranger Thing reference. So it goes into your bioenergy field, and then it speaks to it or instructs it what to do. And when that energy flows back through the DNA, it goes back to light. So it goes from light to sound, and sound to light, or vice versa, however, because you're using both modalities. So they're kind of crossing. They're creating a kind of DNA cross, a kind of chironic cross, as it moves, into your biofield. And when it comes back through the DNA, it basically invites epigenetic changes that start happening automatically. Not you don't have to necessarily think about it or be in a certain headspace or mind space or heart space. These things can help, but the effects are just kind of automatic. And so what people begin to experience is epigenetic gene silencing and genes turning on as well. And it begins to create really very tangible, real changes in people's food allergies, energy levels, their sensitivities to the environment, just so many things. It's extraordinary.
I've had my own experiences with sound healing. In the chat, Slick, he co-hosts with this guy named Chance Garden, who does a form of energy healing using tuning forks. Nice. And in my case, it was a pretty deep tissue tear of a muscle, and it was very quickly after that it healed. And so Chance is, excellent with that. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we actually do use tuning forks to stay on the right note and to just to give it a certain structure, give the session a structure. One of my friends is Eileen Day McCusick. She wrote "Tuning the Human Biofield," and I mean, I have her sonic sliders and all all that stuff as well. I mean, she and I go way back. She writes about she mentions regenetics in tuning the human biofield.
She's the one who trained Chance.
Yeah, right. We have a lot of overlap, people who facilitate or have experienced both modalities. They're very, very complementary.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have an interview from just about maybe 4 months ago with Eileen on my YouTube channel, so you can go check that out. That was a great interview, actually. She's amazing.
Absolutely. So we've been doing a lot of different studies on sound vibration. Are you familiar with cavitation bubbles that they are able to stabilize using sound and then get a flash of light out of the inside of the cavitation bubbles?
You know, that's been going on for a little while, hasn't it? Yeah. It's really, really pretty interesting. It's the same concept that I'm talking about. I believe that it's a translation that's happening at that kind of quantum level.
Right. I think there's a lot of this energy in the void that is being sort of like called up, and I think a lot of that light that's being produced is from the actual vacuum that's produced with the cavitation bubbles. So you'll find that a lot of different animals in the water actually use cavitation bubbles as defense mechanisms and all sorts of other things. And it's almost like this understanding of sound is part of our biology, but we've sort of lost it over the years.
We've become light centric. I describe how we live in the light domain. This is the domain of what Dewey Larson, for example, might call space time. But there is the sound domain, which gives rise to the light domain, and that is time space. I wrote a novel about this called Snooze, about this kid Max who he basically learns how to travel into the dream world in a very conscious way, and everything is totally reversed. I mean, time and space are opposites. So it's like your senses are more like your physical senses would be more like your intuition there, and your intuition would be physical. It's just crazy to think about. So go check that novel out. It has had a lot of loyal fans over the years.
That really does bring up that holographic angle to the universe, because it's the vibrations that get things flowing, and then from that comes the light and the energy.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you've read Michael Talbot's The Holographic Universe from back in the day, or at least seen it referenced. It was one of the books back in I think he published it in the late 80s or very early 90s, and it kind of kicked off a lot of this holographic research in terms of more mainstream people looking at that. And it's very, very brilliant. He ended up dying very young, tragically, so he didn't get to continue his work, but he was a great writer.
So I was going to mention, are you familiar with a DNA resonance? It almost sounds like familiar with what you are describing in terms of epigenetics, in terms of viewing the genome as an antenna, a receiver, and a transducer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I write about that and a lot of my materials.
And how would you say that would relate? Are you familiar with Robert Becker's, what is it?
The electric
the electric body.
Electric body. That's right. Yeah, I read that years ago. I cite it somewhere, maybe in Conscious Healing.
Would you say that still holds up today?
Absolutely. And now you have the electric universe theory going on, which is more of a cosmological extension of some of that type of thinking, and the idea that we live in an electrical construct. And I think that's true to the extent that it defines what we can perceive with the five senses. But like the biofield, there's more to it. It's more nuanced than that. And this is what I mean. The electromagnetic spectrum that we can perceive part of, and that we can prove that it exists, is an epiphenomenon emerging from what I've been calling time space, or the sound domain. It's not the primary quote unquote reality. There's a deeper level to it. So the electric universe is kind of like the electromagnetic fields of the body that have been studied by heart math, for example, and you can see this toroidal shape of energy that the heart is producing around the body. And that's great, but that's when I talk about the aura or the biofield. That's not what I'm talking about. That is a secondary phenomenon on top of the subtle energy blueprint that everything is structured on. That's where, that's where the light flashes from. It comes out of that energy well that gives rise to what we think of as reality. Now, I think everything is just a dream, including time space, ultimately. And I write about that in these recent books, Get Out of Here Alive and Out Through the Indoor, extensively. This is a major subject. And I talk about how we're, Imagineers in training, learning that we're just dreaming everything, and until we figure that out, we're royally screwed, because we're always going to be putting the cart before the horse. But I would simply say that the electric model is still a materialistic, empiricist model that doesn't take into account where all of this comes from, what gives rise to these phenomena. And ultimately, what gives rise to these phenomena, I contend, is consciousness, or more specifically, the imagination.
Well, and then
That we are
the
being
fact that
imagined into existence, basically, as we imagine other things into existence. We are like the Ouroboros, the serpent consuming its own tail.
Mhm. I mean, given that we only see 0.03% of the electromagnetic spectrum, and then we don't understand about 97% of the DNA and what it codes for, even though we do have the genome, we don't fully understand about roughly 95 to 97% of the human genome. I believe that that was the latest that they had
Yeah,
said.
and it just tells you a lot about the mentality of this kind of materialistic trap that we're in. It's so what do they call that they don't understand? They call it junk
Mhm.
DNA. I call it potential DNA. My idea is that is the part of the DNA that is interfacing with the biofield. And so it's actually the mind of the DNA in a way, not in the way that Lipton talks about, proteins of the cell membrane being the mind. That's the kind of local mind, but the non-local mind is really the junk DNA, the potential DNA.
It's interesting because you speak of the DNA, and when we look at it scientifically, we look at it in its 3D formation, and they usually call it the crystalline, that it has repeating patterns, and it's organized just as a crystal would be. Not that itself is a crystal, but it's similar patterns. And so when we see the patterns being emerged, especially with the sulfide bonds across, we see that the 10-5-6-5 repeat over and over. And, with mysticism and esotericism and occult, that is Yod Hed Vadhe. So I probably said that
Right.
wrong. Apologize. But you see that over and over again. And then when you see the 10, you think of what's his name? The Pythagoreans. When you think of 5, you think of the pentagram, and then 6, the hexagram. And I found what's interesting is that with the 5, you see the 5 being repeated over and over. You see it as the 5 sugar structure. You also see the 5 prime coding region where it attaches and forms the actual nucleic acid.
And you get the solids too.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So it just seems the concepts seem to build upon themselves and repeat throughout history, or echo throughout history. So it's
I know
very interesting.
Greg Braden does a good job of unpacking a lot of that information. And he also looked at how, DNA is basically just code for, the I am, in one of his early books. Fascinating stuff. Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. And for me, the I am is that that dreaming God at the center of it all, dreaming, and I see it all as completely fractalized, where we're trying to figure out how to become dreaming gods ourselves, and then we go off and create another little fractal experiment of, what I call, what John Keats would have called another veil of soul making. This idea that we're not really pre-existing souls; we get made in a crucible of what we think of as a reality. And that allows us to basically individuate and perhaps matriculate one day out of the matrix.
One more thing, I promise. I'll shut up for.
Oh, that's
a while.
great. You're great.
No, but everything you're saying right now, obviously, and we'll pivot to vowels or whatever. Everything you just said right now reminds me of a memorable speech. I don't know how people feel about him, but Philip K. Dick in Mainz, France in 1977, when he talked about how you change one variable, you change everything. You could literally live the same event, say the same thing, do the exact same thing. You change one thing, and the entire reality changes. And it reminds me of when you have a word. In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God. You change one vowel, and you change the entire reality. So it's interesting that you say that about reality, and you can change it like that.
Yeah, there's a writer named William Gray who wrote a book called The Talking Tree, and he said that consonants give words their bodies, but vowels put the soul into them, and it's that they are the engine for reality creation. And my concept is that the idea of in the beginning was the word is actually literal, that a dreaming God, I use that term kind of loosely, that can mean whatever you want it to mean. A dreaming God basically spoke this construct into existence with vowels. And then it gets a little tricky. And then somehow into the programming, consonants were inserted. They weren't supposed to be there. And that created duality by separating the sounds. And so we get this experiment.
Something I did want to ask you about when it comes to like vowels. It was something that came up a few times when me and Lisa were covering I think like grimoires and maybe even ciphers and stuff. I had often wondered with Hebrew, they really don't, they're lacking them. And then other languages, they have them. Do you think that is kind of maybe a removal of power? And maybe giving the vowels to other languages using it might be more magical than ones without it?
My understanding with Hebrew is that the vowels are just not allowed to be written. They're there, but that they're in some way. I've heard all kinds of different theories on why they were removed in that way. What the agenda was, and I don't know the truth of that. You could see it as honoring the sacredness of the vowels. You could see it as hoarding that power for the rabbi class. I just don't know. That sounds like something the Catholics would do by taking the word of God and basically making that so that only they had access to that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there were multiple agendas going on with that.
Sol, are you sorry, Nick?
Go ahead.
Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Stephen Flowers and his idea of the keywords? And also, because what Lisa was saying, obviously, I was thinking the whole time, because I'm a Vajrayana practitioner, is that we use the 5 as our primordial number, our primordial system. So obviously, all of this that you're saying resonates with me. Everything that Lisa said resonates with me. It makes sense. But I have a little bit of a different cosmological map, maybe, than you. But I find it very interesting. And so I just wanted to know if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Stephen Flowers. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm not to the level you are, obviously. He was a pretty famous runologist, right?
We got him coming on, actually.
Cool. Yeah. I would be open to learning more about his model for sure, but I can't say that I know more than just the name and the general subject matter.
So I can just explain it, not explain his work, but the concept is very similar to that of Tantra, which I think you might actually be quite familiar. See, it sounds like you're familiar with it. So he borrows something from it. He's really using Evola. He cites Evola heavily, so it's not necessarily directly the tantric text, but it's an understanding, a level of understanding. So he's using this idea of the bijas or the keywords to sort of unlock, just like you were saying, the angles within the trapezoid, some kind of trapezoidal shape that he's built. And some people can understand it as being like a birth chart, because if you look at a contemporary birth chart, there, like the astrological table can often look trapezoidal if it has the right angles, the right alignments. So it does resonate with me that you say like there's a connection with DNA, the angle, the keyword, saying something, the toroidal field. So you're like wrapping it like a mantra. You can also unwrap it, turn it the other way around, depending on which way it's locked or twisted. So I don't know, just very interesting to me.
Yeah, I love all these connections. I mean, that's interesting. I would need to spend some time just reading and I guess contemplating some of this material to be able to speak about it intelligently. I get that there's an obvious resonance there, and that's very interesting. So thanks for bringing that to my attention.
So, can I ask you about some of the electrical potentials within the body? For instance, the nature of bones as being piezoelectric, and also the interstitial tissues are piezoelectric, and the hair and the fingernails. Is there some kind of a electrical exchange going on at these points with the energy field around a person? Can that be influenced?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, basically, we're these balls of fascia, and fascia is one of the most piezoelectric things in the world. I mean, it is amazingly capable of generating that kind of charge, or generating, storing, transferring that sort of charge. It's what it does, and really, I think that you're healthy when you're keeping up that charge, right? And when that begins to go away, you begin to experience problems. I don't know if you've heard of John Barnes. He's the one of the one of the original writers on myofascial release work, and he wrote back in the 1990s. And his books are all about the piezoelectric qualities of the fascia, and it's absolutely fascinating. And as I was reading that years ago, it occurred to me that there was an automatic interface going on with the aura or the biofield at all times, and they were um, basically connecting with each other. I even went so far as to theorize that a lot of the translation mechanism when you're speaking to your biofield, like with potentiation, and you're using sound and light, that you're passing energy through your own fascial system into that. And I never wrote about that, but it just seemed like that's how it would work to me, because that's sort of your spacesuit that you're wearing, your fascial spacesuit.
Well, in some ways, you could see this fascia actually having a two-way communication. So you could actually collect electrical signals using that piezoelectric conversion of vibrations. So you've
Oh, I
got
think,
a
and then there may even be people doing some of that research already. You're ringing a bell for me there.
I just think that the relationship between sound, the piezoelectric effect, and the body is almost as profound as the easy water demonstrations, which, that's something I'm interested in as well. I don't know if you have any more information on that, but that's just sort of an emerging field right now where they're looking at these exclusionary zones in water. I didn't know if you had any more information on that or not.
It's definitely not my. I mean, I've done my research with Masaru Emoto and that sort of thing, and looked at you know cellular water. I mean, there's golly, we could talk about like plant stem cells, for example. That's a fascinating new thing that's happening, where you there's a woman named Jen Payer who has written a book about this. I can get you the title for it. It's it is I read it not long ago. I wish I could access it. anyway, Jen Payer is her name, Payeur. And essentially, this is to make a long story short, she now owns a company that goes in and basically harvests what was probably Hildegard von Bingen's herb garden 1,000 years ago in the Italian Alps. And so they're going in and taking the budding aspects of plants, flowers, and trees, and then they're using spagyrics, they're macerating them, and they're turning them into stem cells that actually act a lot like stem cells in your own body, but even though you're not a plant. It's crazy, crazy stuff. The healing properties of these things are completely off the charts. And when these doctors have looked at the structured water in these stem cells, in these liquid concoctions, they are nearly identical to structured water inside a healthy human cell.
So for people who don't know, spagyrics are a combination of a plant's salt, sulfur, and mercury that they recombine and then create a medicine out of. So you would have the alcohol of the plant, you would have the ashes of the plant, you would have the essential oils from the plant all recombined. Is there another addition to that technique that she uses that you know of?
You mean a different part of the technique?
Right.
Well, the main thing isn't technical, although spagyrics are used to enhance these things. The main thing is that you're harvesting the budding aspects of these plants. Usually you're harvesting the mature parts of these plants when they've gone through their growing season and they don't have any stem cells left. All of the power is really gone. It's amazing that herbs and herbology work as well as they do because you're basically using the leftovers of the vitality of the plant. So they go in and get the raw vegetal power of these different types of trees and shrubs and flowers. It's amazing. And then they have very specific uses. You might, be aware of, the use of a dandelion or whatever. So some of them they're pretty well known what they do. It's just that these are kind of like herbs on steroids, to kind of make a joke. They're so powerful that they put a lot of herbology into a completely different context. Now, having said that, they can also be used in tandem with other herbs. They can be used in tandem with homeopathics. They can be used if you're having to take allopathic medicines or drugs, and they can make things more powerful, more effective, and they can also help by reducing the side effects and the negative effects, Herxheimer reactions, that sort of thing, because they actually drain your system of toxins in a different way from a lot of other approaches. There's drainage and detox. So they actually drain, where they allow your body to use your phase 1 liver detox mostly to get this stuff out of your body. Herxheimer reactions happen when people end up sliding into phase 2 conjugation, where the liver has to tag everything and with using glutathione, and then you're into like, okay, the body is on the defensive and it's getting beaten up by the toxins. If it can basically handle toxins through its filtration of phase 1 liver detox, you're good to go. So what these things do is they let your body detox really intense things by first draining them out and then letting the liver just filter them through phase 1 liver detox.
That's really interesting. From what I know of the spagyrics, it's a beginning phase to getting the plant stone, which would be like a version of the philosopher's stone that can instantly transmute plants.
Well, I don't know if you're aware that my new book, Get Out of Here Alive, is all about the philosopher's stone, basically. And it's about creating your own philosopher's stone inside your body. My take is that it's definitely not some little stone that you stick in your pocket like in Harry Potter that lets you live forever. It's something that you create energetically in your solar plexus region or in your womb if you're a woman.
May I ask along that line, can you give us some of your experiences or maybe ideas of inspiration pertaining to do that, maybe via your Qigong practice, and maybe inspire people to look into a practice like that for maybe that very goal.
Well, I didn't really come at that notion from my work with Qigong. It helped me in other ways, but that wasn't a piece that I got from that work at the time. In retrospect, looking back on it, I see it more clearly. There's a great writer on inner alchemy named John Kreiter. He would be wonderful on this show if he were willing to come on. I don't know if that's the sort of thing he does. He's even more private and elusive than I am. In any case, he has a series of books called the Magnum Opus Trilogy on inner alchemy, which is more of a westernized version. I don't know. Are you familiar with him, Ethan?
I've seen his books.
I'm sorry, no, not particularly, no.
So anyway, what I would say is that the work that I'm doing, I actually have practical things you can do to begin working on creating your Philosopher's Stone in my materials, including a new type of bodywork / breath work called pragmalchemy. And you can check all of that out on solluckman.substack.com. The first 3 exercises are just available to the public, and you can spend months, if not years, just doing these 3 exercises. So they are designed to help you essentially heal your trauma, take back your energy, get yourself off of bad timelines moving forward. Back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago with how a vowel can change, a whole reality, and accumulate all of that energy in your solar plexus area, then pack it into this until it begins to actually turn into what I think of as kind of a hyperdimensional piezoelectric stone.
That sounds about right. If you're talking about doing the reverberations, that's really where the change comes between the spagyric and the plant stone, is they have way higher rates of reverberation, and it's through those reverberations that you get an elevated material. So that sounds like you're doing the same process within the body.
Yeah, it does sound a lot like that, and it's really interesting how the plants, even taken in this way, can be almost like guides. They can communicate with you and teach you things. And in fact, I'm fairly certain that's one of the ways we learn so much about plants, is that they just taught us about themselves, and they were communicating with people who were willing and able to listen at a time when maybe there was less static or something like that. I'm not sure why, but in any case, clearly very ancient peoples had extensive, profound, transformational knowledge of plants and how to use them.
Yeah. I know there is that's put Lisa on the spot here, but I think there's even like a tale where it says that the plants will actually talk to you.
Yes. One.
That's actually what I was going to ask too. That's a good question.
Mm-hmm. The shaman in Peru said that.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, no, a shaman in Peru had said to me that, because I had asked what the process was to become a shaman, and it was you leave your tribe, you go into the forest, rainforest, and you give up meat and all forms of fornication, and you sit and you commune with the plants until they start to speak to you. And you go a minimum of a year, but about 2 years or something, and you come back with the plants having told you everything that they need to tell you, and mainly tell you what their use is for. But and then obviously he went on to say how everything corresponds to each other. Like he said, the bite of the snake, and he held taxidermied snake or whatever, and he goes, the cure to this is this bark, and he laid it next to the dead snake, and it had a corresponding checkerboard pattern. And so you see how everything in nature basically mirrors each other of what is cure. I mean, what cures, what ailment based on. I know there's a term for that in terms of medicine, but
doctrine of signatures. Sorry, Lisa.
Thank you. Yes, that's exact doctrine of signatures. That's exactly it. And then just to insert, what's interesting is that you said how plants receive information, And it is believed how with us, in our blood, we carry iron. It's a metal, it's a receiver, or at least iron can be used as a conductor of some sort of electricity receiving. And when you look at chlorophyll in plants, they carry magnesium in the place of where we would carry iron. And magnesium is an earth metal. So that would also be somewhat of a receiver. So just interesting that you said that.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, it just sounds silly, but like I have said, like when I've had magical experiences, I think you like understand things you maybe couldn't make sense of prior. I'm wondering if maybe wherever you are might make a difference too of what you understand when you come to. Because like now I'm even wondering if that makes sense why some occultists go to certain places. Maybe they're like, you're just not saying that this is the case, but maybe Crowley was in the desert because he thought there was already something underneath the ground. Who the fuck knows? I don't know. So something to that effect. Or like, was Manson trying to go to wherever in Mexico to go have a magical experience somewhere in the rainforest where there's tons of things over there to pick up on? I don't know. It just sounds like stone thought that I just had right now.
Yeah, that's
Well,
great.
I suspect, yeah, that's why. Oh, go ahead. I apologize.
No,
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
No, I was just going to say places like, I'm a big mound dude. If you're familiar with the ancient architecture of America, the mounds,
Sure.
places like Serpent Mound, the largest effigy mound in the world. It sits in Adams County, Ohio. Kind of a universal calendar of the world we live in as far as determining the elements of nature and seasons and phases of everything, the moon, the sky, everything. But it's revered by all the New Age cultures. They go there on solstices and whatnot and have big situations. I'm not, maybe they don't call them rituals. They certainly look like it to me. But who might have declared a ritual? You know what I mean?
That's great. That's great. Well, I was just going to tell you, Nick, that when I was sick and trying to figure out how to get well back in the day, and I was being led down to Brazil, my partner Lee she and I chose a very specific place in Brazil to go to, which was this little town called Búzios, and we chose it because it was one of the closest towns that we could access to one of Ivan Sanderson's Devil's Graveyards. If you're familiar with his research, this researcher back years and years ago named Ivan Sanderson, he theorized that the Earth was made up of 12 vortex points. And he gridded it out and drew, exactly on the map where these things would be. And that's where you get, it's like the Bermuda Triangle is one of these things. It's where you get all the crazy sightings and disappearances and reappearances and all that stuff. And they always happen in these like devil's graveyards. So we went to Búzios thinking that the veil between worlds would be a lot thinner, and we might get more information. We might get more, and that's where we had those crazy lights that came across the water and hopped in our bodies. Sure enough, boom! It was like it worked.
That's interesting. Lisa, was there anything, or Headless, anything that you two wanted to add to this?
I'd like to add. I'd like to get the name of that book, please.
That's in Potentiate Your DNA. I tell that story. I don't know that Ivan Sanderson actually himself wrote a book. He's a pretty famous figure from back in the day. I mean, he was on, talk shows and other things, is pretty well known. He's also the researcher who went and saw the Minnesota Iceman, if you're familiar with that story from Bigfoot lore. And he looked at it, and he was a scientist, and he said, there's basically no way this is a fake. This is the real thing. And so he is a dissenting voice on the subject of Bigfoot, which is a character in my novel Snooze. So I actually cite Sanderson and his research in that novel as well as the amazing work on this subject by Lloyd Pye, one of the greatest of all the crypto researchers, the late great Lloyd Pye. He died about a decade ago.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question, if you don't mind, there, Nick.
Yeah,
You're
go
about
for
to say something.
Yeah, no, I forgot.
Uh,
Unfortunately, I did have something.
Right. I'm in for the save. You looked like you balked, so I came in,
Yeah,
swooped
I
in
did.
at the balk.
Thank you. I have all of you here.
So if I remember correctly, sir, we started this journey here about an hour ago with you describing some mystical experiences down in Brazil. Is that correct?
Yep.
So, and that's kind of how DNA was founded, right? Francis Crick was big into some mystical experiences as well, with some LSD and whatnot, right?
Well, that's how the
story goes.
I've heard people dispute that, but I would not be surprised if that were the case, actually.
Yeah, I mean, from my understanding, that is, I've seen a lot disputing it, but I mean, from some credible sources, and I believe it was the folks down there at Maps did a extensive piece on it. After he died, so it's obviously they're pro psychedelics, but what I'm saying is I think there's an argument to be made that based on Crick's own admissions and statements, that's exactly what occurred. Whether or not it's a popular idea or not, that's probably what's really a dispute. But I think it's interesting that, in the concept of where do these ideas come from, do you have to be doing some mystical hallucinogenic experiences to talk to DNA, or is the DNA talking to folks through this, like Crick? Did Crick discover the DNA, or did the DNA discover Crick?
Yeah, I don't believe you have to be doing anything except listening. I think it's just part of our human technology. Having said that, there's, you have Jeremy Narby writing The Cosmic Serpent about shamans in South America who would take certain potions to be able to see essentially what Narby theorized was DNA. And these serpents would talk to the shamans and tell them how to heal people. And specifically, they would give them sound and light codes that they could sing and think to make people well. And that was one of the major inspirations behind potentiation and regenetics.
No, I'm definitely into those. That's awesome. I'm definitely into those ideas. I'm certainly not anti-intoxicants, if that's how I came off before. But I am interested in the idea of where ideas come from and where thoughts come from. And I feel like, certainly with my own mystical experiences through hallucinogens, that I can see where some of these things may go on, but it still begs the question of who's talking, who's communicating to who.
Yeah,
what I mean?
It's got to be.
You see these shapes and stuff, those experiences, and go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's got to be a two-way street. Everything is kind of a two-way street. I come back to this image of
someone's got to pick up the phone call.
Serpent. Yeah, the serpent biting its tail. Everything just kind of circles around. I mean, we're being dreamed and we're dreaming, and it's all part of this construct that we're in. So I think that we're being taught and we're teaching. We're listening and we're speaking always at the same time, in a way where we're in that dual communication. So DNA is so amazing in that way, because it's constantly, it's constantly emitting and receiving information. It's its nature.
Right. That's what I was kind of getting at with Crick, maybe plugging in his own DNA to a greater system with these communications, because courtesy of the LSD, that is.
Yeah, right. Sure. I mean, I'm not denying that those types of substances can certainly amplify some of our own abilities. They can also distort and cause us to misinterpret what we're seeing. I think that is also a possibility.
Sure. No, I can agree with that for sure.
I think in a lot of ways, what you'll find is that there's the systematized approach versus the chaotic approach. And, with the chaotic approach, you never know what you're going to get. But people have been able to drill down and sort of systematize the experiences with the divine on a level to where you can actually get that tuning of your DNA towards that level. And I think they've got the idea of the God helmet and these other sort of devices that sort of change the frequency inside your brain to produce these responses. But I think that can be done even without the assistance of electromagnetics.
Yes, I would agree. I would completely agree.
I wonder, Sol, if you might share some insights into maybe contrasting allopathy or traditional conventional medicine and just not necessarily one form of herbal systems or alternative holistic healing, but just if someone is thinking about that inclination and maybe you know of a tonic that is or an herb that is generally good for uplifting the immune systems of us all that people might consider. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. The In order to respond to the part about allopathic medicine in relation to other forms of healing, let me just cite the work of Larry Dossey, Dr. Larry Dossey, who wrote a number of books. One's called Healing Words. Another one was the Reinventing Medicine. And I actually map all of this out in Potentiate Your DNA. It's a fascinating model, and he basically divided the history of medicine into 3 eras. So the first one was what he called Era 1, and that was essentially physical medicine, the body as a machine. It focused on how to just correct physical imbalances and that kind of thing. And you could include in that some of the early chemistry experiments, spagyrics, herbs, other types of healing. So again, we're looking at the chemistry, the physical makeup of the body, and then at some point in time in his model, we moved into Era 2, which was mind-body medicine. And so we get into psychology, psychotherapy, power of positive thinking, and all of that. And we were looking at mind-body connections, and that's certainly been a very, very rich area of research. Epigenetics would be an example of mind-body medicine in a lot of ways. What's fascinating about Dr. Dossey's model, we're talking about a cardiologist here, right? And so his third era is fascinating. For him, Era 3 is non-local. It's the non-local era. And it's when all of these quantum effects, these consciousness effects, the power of the imagination, the power of feeling. I write about the power of positive feeling, for example, as a way of generating these possibilities. Like you were talking about Headless, about, you don't even need the headset or whatever. Well, I totally agree. You can use other parts of your being to achieve these sometimes miraculous effects. One of the things that's fascinating about the plant stem cells, Ethan, is that they have the ability to this was very elucidating for me, because we think that everything has a role and it must behave in a certain way, and this is how it is. That's kind of the way our science and our medicine look at things. Research has shown relative to these plant stem cells that they are capable of taking a damaged organ system, like your liver's not functioning that well, right? And conscripting, for example, the kidneys to perform liver functions until your liver comes back online. It's fascinating. This shouldn't be happening, but it is happening. So, there's a lot of food for thought there in terms of like immune herbs to look at from a plant spirit medicine perspective, or a plant stem cell perspective. There's black currant, dog rose is a good one, boxwood, silver fir is really pretty amazing. Silver fir is really great at regrowing bone and getting osteoblasts to come online and that sort of thing. So you can do a lot of very, very powerful regeneration using those types of elements. And I'm not an expert in this by any means. I got off on this because it's something I've been studying. I continue to learn things, myself. So I'm just a student of all of this right now. I don't pretend to be an authority on this subject.
Yeah, that is the plant stem cell idea is absolutely, you said it, fascinating. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I mean, I do recommend that people go and check out Jen's work. I'm gonna tell you what her book title is right now because I feel like I've dropped the ball on that, and I can't seem to find it in my bookmarks, which is weird. But anyway, yeah, it's Ancient Plant Wisdom: How to Improve and Maintain Your Health Using Concentrated Plant Stem Cell Remedies. So, Ancient Plant Wisdom.
I wonder if that's why you see a lot of occultists into botany. It's really interesting, especially amongst the Nazis that are big into botany.
But do you realize the nod, the implications that says is that so stem cells at its theory is a pluripotent totipotent cell. It basically contains all the blueprint, all the information to become any cell in the body, right?
Right.
And to say that a stem cell from an entire different kingdom, forget phylum, forget family, order, all that stuff, but to a whole other genre or kingdom of species that can create a cell that functions in another organism. So what does that mean? We are plants? We come from
Well,
plants? We all come
well,
from source? Do we all
the-
contain the exact same DNA, and it doesn't matter what species you have? You can now create any species of any whatever based on all pluripotent totipotent cells.
this is where the alchemy comes in, because in the concept behind plant alchemy, taking this salt, sulfur, and mercury from these plants, it then has a resonance with the salt, sulfur, and mercury in other kingdoms. So they had three kingdoms. They had the plant, the animal, and the mineral. And so by making something that was potent enough using the principles of a different kingdom, you could create a resonance within the animal kingdom or the mineral kingdom as well. So there is something to that.
What's very interesting when you look at that Tria Prima recipe, which is what you're talking about, the salt, sulfur, mercury. John Kreider looks at it from a different perspective, from an inner alchemy perspective, and he basically talks about how it's the out breath, the in breath, and the void between them. And what you're doing with the Tria Prima in inner alchemy is using the imagination, the attention, to do the types of things you're talking about doing alchemically or chemically. So I would say that we have the ability to turn on our own stem cells in our own bodies. There's tons of at least anecdotal evidence to support the idea that there are people walking around who are really old, like Saint Germain, who've been doing this for a long time, basically just rebooting the body. And you have Castaneda's work and shamanism, all about the death defier, and so this is happening, and it's really just a utilization of the mind and the imagination. We don't need even a science. We just need people who can become childlike again as an adult and utilize that power that they can then tap into and store away to perform miracles.
Sorry, I had a quick follow up for Lisa. It was really interesting that everything that you said, Lisa, I totally agree with you. I think there's an interesting idea in American herbalism that the plants that we consider sometimes invasive, but they grow in very specific georegional areas, are actually attracted to like the chronic illnesses that are aggregated in that region. So like the things growing nearest you or nearest certain areas are actually drawn to actually the infirmities of the land, because you could consider the manifestation of illness. This is like sort of drawing also from JJ and like the mound stuff, right? It's like the manifestation of illness is also a discontinuity in the land. Like the geoontological relations are out of balance. So uprising would be in Buddhism, we would say it was naga diseases. So any kinds of sorry, Lisa.
No, go.
No. That's it. I'm done.
I'm so sorry. No, well, I mean, because it would be evolutionary beneficial to be available for something that species is lacking, because that means that species will consume it more and pass along the seeds and propagate it more. So we would be evolutionarily beneficial to provide some sort of benefit to the deficiency of the species that will propagate you or help to propagate you. So I could see that absolutely makes sense. I mean, and I don't know how true this is, but I heard that like people used to chew seeds or whatever, and as it passes through your body, it detects things that it lacks or your body lacks, and so therefore it reorganizes its genome to provide benefit to the organism that consumed it, because it would only benefit if it keeps providing a benefit to that species that consumed it.
Hmm.
I don't know how true that is, but I've heard it somewhere.
It's like jewelweed and poison ivy, how they grow around each other, and one takes care of the other. But also, I think they only keep it in their mouths. So I've seen a lot of holistic farmers doing that, putting the seeds in their mouths and then planting it, because apparently it will take the information from your saliva.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I have heard of that.
That's exactly it. I mean, same concept. When a newborn is suckling, or nursing. I'm sorry, nursing. Any kind of deficiency or anything like that, it feeds back to the mammary gland and then up the pituitary, and the pituitary formulates everything in the female so she can emit it back out into the milk in order to provide healing or anything like that. So, I mean, the concept is there. I mean, it's been proven. It just, I don't think it's been tested. So that's very interesting.
Okay. Anybody else have anything they wanted to ask? Elisa, did you want to bring up another thing with the vowels, or?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to, sorry, I wanted to revisit the vowel part, Sol, that you had
Sure.
kind of started on at the beginning, and how you structured the vowels to DNA, and kind of like a segue from DNA now back into vowels that you were touching upon early on in the episode.
If I understand your question, the basic methodology was to do kinesiology to determine which vowels lined up with which nucleotides. And was this a universal thing? Was it the same for different people? We also were looking at different energy families. This idea that people are not all the same energetically. There are actually 12 different tribes, as it were, 12 different groups of so-called humans on the planet who have radically different energy structures. So when people talk about, well, the heart energy, the heart chakra has to do with blah blah blah. Well, it does if you belong to that one family, that it does. Otherwise, the heart might have a completely different energetic function. So there's no uniformity in terms of the energy system. So we were looking to see if the the nucleotides lined up with those the five vowels across all different groups, and they did. So that was very, very interesting. So there was a kind of a unifying aspect of DNA across the human family, if you will.
I guess the reason I brought it up is because, Nick, when you mentioned that we covered about sigils and ciphers and what have you, and went to gematria, there was a time when words or letters were linked in with numbers, and you had the alphanumerical system and what have you before it was separated, and it was thought that that letters had power and value or mathematical value of sorts. And so when you say vowels to nucleotides, it's almost like I believe you had mentioned something about that they're similar. And so it to me it's almost begging the question. So then the vowels or slash nucleotides are breathing life or causing existence forth when they are placed, in a certain sequence in a certain pattern.
Yeah, and it's almost as if when you, and I agree with that, when you speak or sing or think to them, that it's almost like playing an instrument, and they respond, and they respond in some way, and by using different vowel placements, you can invite these elements of the genomic structure to do different things. You know, I always tiptoe right back into the the realm of miracles and magic and seeming impossibilities. There's a wonderful part in the work of Ken Carey, who wrote the was it the Starseed trilogy? Great kind of a new age writer, but very brilliant, very poetic uh, thinker and writer, and he proposed this kind of evolutionary trajectory where as we come more into our power, and I don't know if this is true or not on a species level, but the concept is so fascinating. It would be that we would be able to sing to the elements, to our own bodies, for example, to tell them what to do in a very reciprocal, harmonious way. So you would, and he called these songs of distinction. So you would sing to maybe your bones to grow stronger, and they would grow stronger. No plants necessary, just again, the sheer energy of that intention and imagination. So when we got around to doing some regenetics related activations years ago that were designed to help the organ systems to kind of tonify the organs and strengthen the hormonal system, we called them songs of distinction in honor of King Carey.
It makes me think of enhancing or even making parallel the sympathetic and parasympathetic parts of our nervous system, right? Activating the more auto controlled aspect, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up because once again, we have the three primary, with the autonomic and the the sympathetic parasympathetic systems can be looked at almost like we have the conscious part of our systems, which is here with us in space time, and then there's this unconscious part of the nervous system that's sitting over in time space, and so we have to be able to actually have those interface or communicate in some way. So when we do things like raising our energy, our intention, when we speak to parts of ourselves, when we use plant stem cells to help fortify our internal communication, if we use tuning forks, whatever we're doing, I think we're increasing the flow, the clean flow of information between those realms, and that's going to create more coherence and better health.
Jin, Friday Jin.
Yes, sir.
Yes. I was going to bring up that image on the bottom.
Sure. Well, just because Sol has referenced the sleeping god, I just thought we would look at for like a moment, like the OG sleeping god. So this is Narayana or Vishnu or Mahavishnu. Although he only has one head in this image, and if he was Mahavishnu, he would have 1,008 faces. So
that's great.
But it's implied, and he wears Sashnaga as his crown. But in this image, he's actually sleeping. He's sleeping on the supernal ocean, very Neptunian. So this is the sleeping
He's
god.
also the god of DNA. Look at all that DNA, those Nagas.
Right. That's a very interesting way to frame him, because he is often depicted as a Naga himself. Like his legs actually have the tail of a snake. But I will also say that in Shaivite sort of Puranic understanding, and obviously in Tantra, he is not the finality or the terminus. He would just be sort of what he's called is the Mahavira, the greater hero, the worldly hero, you could say. So he is just a cast member of the Leela, but he of himself is not the force of moksha. But of course, in normative Puranic Vaishnavism, yes, certainly.
Yeah, and when I use that reference, I'm using it as a much more generic reference, so I'm not actually pegging it to a specific tradition. But I do appreciate what you're saying about him not being the terminus in that way. So thanks for sharing that. I'm using it basically more poetically, this idea that we are in a dream, and that we are dreaming realities, and the game of the construct is to become conscious of that we're doing that, and to become better at it. And if we get good enough, we can actually kind of fractalize off and become the sleeping god of a new experiment. I question whether there is such a thing as a terminus at all. I don't really think there is an alpha or an omega. It's why we speak about the alpha and the omega, because they're the same thing. It's the Ouroboros once again. So I would just have a different cosmology, or map of understanding how things came into being and where we're going.
Okay. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to bring up or ask? Sol, was there anything other stuff that you might want to talk about that's in your books or on your site?
I mean, I'm good. I know we've been going for a while. I don't know how long you usually go. I think we've covered some pretty meaty material here. I don't know.
No, I'm fine.
I don't want to
make sure. Just want to make sure you didn't leave anything off that you wanted to talk about.
I don't know if JJ had something.
What's going on, sir?
No, I was just giving it a thumbs up. It's great material. I definitely appreciate your time there, Sol, and conversation insight for sure.
I appreciate that. Thank you, all of you, for great questions and insights. I mean, I learned a lot doing these interviews, and I would have to say I've learned a lot on this one. I made a bunch of notes in my little note app. Lots of stuff to look into. So I really am thankful to all of you for bringing that to me.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh,
in terms of the DNA, Sol, maybe, and Nick can tell you more, and Jen, the Sefer Yetzirah,
Mm-hmm.
They talk about that extensively, weirdly enough. The
Cool.
connection to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do write a little bit about the Sephirah in one of the chapters of one of my books,
Very
and
nice. Very
all
nice.
that connection.
Awesome. All right. Well, I guess we'll let everybody kind of give their little spiel. Lisa, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Mhm.
Hell yeah. Anything you wanted to?
Just occultresearchinstitute.org. We have some contributors from the Occult Rejects that contribute really cool stuff, literary stuff. So check us out, occultresearchinstitute.org.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Friday Jen, the Ninja.
Thank you, boss. And thank you, Lisa, Headless, JJ, and of course, Ethan, and our guest Sol. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me on, Nick. It's not really our guest, it's your guest, but we're on a cross table, I guess. So, and thank you. So check me out, Threshold Saints at Wukong Reborn, WUKONG Reborn on X, Twitter, and at Threshold Saints on IG. And for the show account is also at Threshold Saints. And Nick will have my link tree in the bottom, like always. Thank you guys so much. Really fun.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Appreciate you joining us. And Headless Giant, what is up, my man?
How's it going? So, you've got about an hour left. Get those emails in there. Fill up that inbox. All right. So you can find me on YouTube and Twitter, Headless Giant. Thank you so much for coming on, Sol. I got a whole page full of notes too. So
Yeah, so
great
this
talking to you again.
is great. Yeah, that was definitely fun. That kind of burnt me out pretty quick, actually. I thought a little bit too hard, I think.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, then I had this whole thing in my head and then I lost it and I was like, fuck. JJ, sir, please let everybody know where they can find your amazing work.
Nick, as always, I appreciate the invite, good sir, and fellow Occult Rejects, as always. Fantastic conversation. Great to meet you, Sol, and I agree with Headless there. I also have a lot of notes that I've taken here as well, so it's appreciate your time and insights again. It's a great conversation. And JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD, more notably not the vice president. And if you enjoy the film Back to the Future, I highly recommend checking out last night's Operation GCD Live. It's a full-blown Occult Rejects panel of an occult and esoteric review of the 1985 cinematic masterpiece Back to the Future. And if you like dark comedies and unfortunate events, highly recommend checking out Operation GCD Sundays, 8 p.m. And my unfortunate tales of being cursed by a haunted doll for the last 12 plus years, the curse of Robert the Doll. Appreciate y'all's time.
That is great. That is great. And Ethan Indigo, sir, please.
Thank you, everyone. Sol, that was very educational and inspiring. I really appreciate you sharing all that. And everyone, always great to communicate with you. Ethan Indigo on all the usual social media, and Occult Research Institute have an article or two. And so, yeah, thank you, everyone. That was awesome. So
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And Sol, please let everybody know again where they can find all your stuff.
Well, thank you, Nick. Thanks to everybody for your time and the precious gift of your attention, for sure. I'm at solluckman.substack.com. Please stop by, say hello. You can subscribe for free. And I wanted to say I'm very open to coming on. You know, if you got a podcast where any of this material would resonate, you know, let me know. Reach out to me. You can contact me through the Substack, and yeah, let's talk about that. I like talking about this. I don't, you know, it's like in terms of my tribe, you know, someone had left a comment. I saw maybe they did like a super chat type of thing, and they're like, you know, thank you for speaking my language. And I'm like, it's kind of like me, like sitting around with you guys, you know, it's like, this is my kind of like the virtual family thing where, oh yeah, we can actually understand each other at least a little bit. You know, we don't have to agree on everything or speak exactly the same language, but it's just nice to spend time with people like you.
Thank you very much.
Oh yeah. Appreciate it. No, this was a great talk for real. I was very excited. And thank you everybody in the chat too. And oh yeah, by the way, I do have Sol's links in the bottom already. I have the free download, and I do have a Substack. Thank you for everybody in the chat. Thank you, Donald Ferguson. And I guess since before we end the live, Donald is coming on Sunday. So, you know, big show. The guy's gonna blow our minds. So definitely catch it. It's Donald Ferguson. I think it's Sunday. Yes. And thank you again, everybody in the chat. That's why I went live. I thought there was some great stuff in there. That's what's up. And again, thank you all for joining me. And that was great stuff. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.